Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my precious pack, and welcome back once more to VEGA Conflict. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do a quick Decimation prize list overview and recommendation. And then I'm going to attack some of the top targets that give out the Eriko boxes and things like that. But for now, let's go ahead and let's take a look at what the top prizes are. Dr. Cobus Sharon. Specialized energy weapons, yeah, he's the cannon commander, boosts health, he works for the Umbral fleets, and blah blah blah. Quick rundown, his stats is bonus health, bonus cannon range, increased energy damage, energy resistance, and if you use 4 cruisers, increased shield damage. So nothing really special there, just a general commander for combat fleets involving cruisers and cannon weapons, whilst getting a healthy increase to your hit points and resistance. Okay, the ambush formation. Well, immediately it started to put me to sleep just looking at it. I can think of a few uses for it, however I can think of quite a few more for the standard ones that we start with, or that we can earn easily through the campaigns or farming. And then the dissipators. All good, but long overdue for what they were needed for, and we also need newer armor, better weapons, and yada yada yada. Okay. Recommendations for the first set of items is going to be, that you can see on screen, the commander, the Blight Disruptor, the Plasma Disruptor, and the Explosive Disruptor, depending on what targets you're being hit by most, match the damage types. The Nightingale and Nighthawk Wings. I actually haven't used any of them yet, however I'm working on getting level 3 for my base, just to have higher level, more specialized damage squadrons. However, just like with most other squadrons, they're not really comparable to their ship counterpart. They don't fly as long, they don't have as much damage, they don't have as much health, they don't move as quickly. The scramble range is the only thing that is better, however, they die just as easily, so it's entirely up to you whether you want to buy them or not, but if you do buy them, I would recommend picking up however many hanger module slots you need them for, and just match it with a 50-50 ratio, or if you're going for the split of damage types, then it's going to be a 1-to-3 ratio. However, I wouldn't recommend using the alien damages because most people aren't going to be attacking you with anything that isn't resistant to aliens, so Blight, or, well, actually mainly you're just going to want the plasma, because thinking about that now, it's you're most likely going to be hit by Umbral fleets, so why not? Echo Cannon Turret, completely useless because most things have counter chain. Heavy Psi Missile, completely useless because most things have counter pierce, and it is far too heavy for the combat modules, especially when most of them actually have resistance to the damage type that it is, so that damage is a joke because I can use 2 level 2 Xeno missiles of the same class for the ships, and they have more damage than that. That's just for a single ship, and it could be a battleship with 9 of them. Minimum range, garbage. Maximum range, garbage. Speeds, garbage. Spread, garbage. Piercing, irrelevant. The area of effect radius, it isn't half bad, but they're not homing weapons, and most weapons, they just don't hit in bases. So can't recommend any of those turrets either. The Javelin. Now this is something I can recommend for anyone who needs a jump ship. However, you just need to understand the fact that once you build it, you're going to have a long repair time. And it's not going to get any better. It sounds like it's raining outside at the moment. But if you do buy it, just keep in mind that it has the best jump drive that you can equip it to for the moment, unless you equip it to the Harvester, which you can. However, again, the long repair time, I never saw them as being useful, because even if you wait for the 10% repair value to launch it again, that's still over an hour. On to the next items. Eriko, Gargoyle, Ogre, Omega. Alright, so the ships. And apparently that is blueprint pieces, or that's a bug in the game. And there's been a lot of bugs in the game lately, so that wouldn't be much of a surprise. Okay, recommendations. Aerico, not because of its spawnable MERS, but due to its bloody overdrive. And it is a bloody overdrive, especially at Mark 5. The stacking overdrive is every time that it summons a ship, so you could put level 1 MERS on it just to die quickly. But it rapidly increases its damage, and if you maximize the damage, you can get a 25% increase at max against ships, and a 25% blight damage increase. So you can get a 50% increase between the two if you go with blight damage. So it would be heavily specialized specifically against Altairian targets. And that's just for its spawning ships. That's not even talking about the other overdrive of it entering into a blight field. Now, this one gets extremely interesting because the ablation, it gains increased defense. Right now, only 10% of damage bypasses ablative armor, just like screens. However, with this, only 5% would pass, so it would be advised to manually control the ships and fly them into the Blight Nebulas that are spawned from the death of a Mer. And it gains resistances, and oh boy does it gain resistances in fairly good numbers. It goes up to 40% in all values. Now, just like how resistances are calculated, it takes the current value and the remaining value up to 100%. So you're never going to be able to achieve 100%, but you're going to be able to achieve more and more. So in this case, it would be 20% over what most likely is 50%, so it would be, what, 10%? So you go from 50 to 60 for that mark level. But again, it's all damage resistance. You get bypass, you get increased speed, rotation, everything like that. So it just gets a ramp up in just about every stat in that regard. So I can recommend picking it up, so make sure you do. Gargoyle Carrier. Okay, this is going to be a fun one, because these are the specialized carriers that they actually have modifiers for weapons. Now, this is one issue that I've actually thought of but never discussed, and that is the fact that since most of the Altairian ships are pre-RPS, they just don't have some of the stats that you'd expect them to, such as the Sovereign was released with beam weapons, and instead of reworking it to match to give it bonuses for its beam weapons, instead it's just as it is. And in comparison, if you use missiles, you get increased area of effect up to 50% in Mark 5. And its missiles have a pretty good area of effect already. But, let's see here. Repair time, 2 hours, 31 minutes, not a surprise. It's Umbra. Ship speed, all standard, and retaliation. I don't even remember what it is because I very oh yeah, it's the one where 3 or more ships enter the firing arc. It dumps a bunch of missiles that have piercing and a 600 meter area of effect. Mostly irrelevant. Cease, as it takes damage, it activates a disruptive fire pulse, so that would be useful against beam weapons, but not much else. Can I recommend the Gargoyle? And for some situations, yes. For most situations, no. Ogre. Don't even have to open the stats and I can recommend it, because I use them for quite a few different things. I have primarily missile builds, especially Nova missile builds. And this is one ship where they got the stats just right, just like with the Daemon, but the Daemon is overpowered for a different reason that we will discuss later. The Bloodlust Overdrive is the main thing that this ship has going for it, and just like with the Eriko, it has a stacking overdrive. And this is actually activated every time it kills a ship. Or one dies when it's firing arc, it stacks these damages. And this is what it does. increased damage per second up to 10% due to the 5 stacks, and a 100% area of effect increase. Now I do not think that increases by level. I'd have to check. Actually, I will check real quick. Let's see here. Mark 5. Okay, that does stack per level, so the area of effect remains the same, but the damage per second increases, and it goes up to a 50% increase, so the more it kills, the stronger it becomes for the set duration. Alright. So, I can recommend picking it up. Okay, the Omega. Again, it's going to be just like the Ogre. I don't even have to recommend going through the stats just to know that it's a good ship, because it's Pharmakon. It has a built-in weapon by default. It was made to be useful with the Trojan cannon, but again, it's the kinetic psi missile in my eyes isn't really useful, and the fact that it has such a large spread is, well, against a large number of targets that'd be useful, but against single targets it's pointless. You'd be better off using eclipse drivers or alternatively missile weapons. But phase state, it does exactly what most other Pharmakon ships do: increase movement speed. Exiting phase state, it just gets increased damage over time stacks, which is something that I bit disappointed by the team's choices for some of the ships, especially for the Pharmakon. And then its screens just become extremely resistant to all damage types except for alien damage, because why leave it open for regular counters when it should be up against specialized ships? But, well, the specialized ships suck against it, even still. Mark 1 for Mark 1, the Zeus loses against it, because it just can't survive the barrage that the Omega unleashes. Especially with the damage resistance and the screens with no drawback. So I can recommend picking up the Omega due to that reason. The Inhibitor Battle Cruiser, again, another ship that I don't have to actually read through the stats to recommend, because I've used them before and they are a good ship, because first, they're a battle cruiser, they're Pharmakon, they're stupidly fast, and they'll get where you need them to go and kill what you need them to. Exiting phase state, it has ablative suppression. Upon impact with the target, it can reduce the target's ablative recovery for 6 seconds. It can increase the threshold by 20%, and it can decrease the ablative recovery by 25%. And that, again, it stacks with level. It gets a damage per second boost upon leaving phase. 10% at Mark 1. I didn't even realize it had that. That's... What does the Renaissance have again? Oh, right. Garbage. Oh yeah, it also becomes more heavily resistant to all damage except for Blight, apparently. But then again, the Blight screen has 75% resistance, so it's just stupidly high. Damage over time details. It's damage over time, don't really know much. You shoot stuff and it stacks. Alright. On to the one that most people will know by now, and that is the Daemon. Again, yet another ship that I do not have to read through the stats to recommend it as a purchase, and as a matter of fact, I would recommend it in the current state even over the Eriko, just because of the phasing that you can acquire with it and the range increase. So, exiting phase, it gets increased damage over time stacks, it gets 50% increased radius, 10% increased speed, weapon speed for torpedoes, and that's for 4 seconds upon exiting phase at Mark 1. Damage over time details, 1000 damage threshold, that won't be hard to achieve. Cruiser damage, range, everything's extremely typical of a battleship. Standard health, standard weight, standard cargo. On to the final one, the Trojan. Okay, I haven't used a Trojan in a long time, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at what it is. Okay, so upon exiting phase, it reduces the damage over time threshold by 10%, so it just becomes easier for it to apply damage over time, but it also increases its innate resistances to all damage types with the exception of alien. Again, leaving no real counter open for anything other than alien damage. However, it can just strip anything that isn't Pharmakon in a few seconds. Well, just a few barrages with a good fitting. Battle cruiser damage, that's something that has that the Altairian cruiser, the Bastion, doesn't have. Resistances are standard. So, a fairly typical cruiser. However, in this case, I do not recommend picking it up because you can get the inhibitor battle cruiser and it will just perform better. The Zeus. For farming, I've found it extremely useful and can recommend it. However, it doesn't really have any majorly notable features because it just exists. That's it. It takes damage and it becomes stronger, and that's it. That's all it does. That's literally all it does. The Renaissance. It's back once more, and what did its feedback loop do? Alright, stasis. Even though when a Pharmakon ship leaves and enters phase, it should theoretically lose that. So, irrelevant stat. Resistance. 10% resistant to just plasma. Well, guess what? It gets hit by every single damage type in the board, so irrelevant. Shield recharge. Irrelevant. Shield defense. Irrelevant. Strafe speed of a set value and turning of a set value, so irrelevant. And a low charge hacking time, so all irrelevant. Not a ship I can recommend. Unless you're farming AI targets, but even then I could also recommend just using the Zeus because it's better in every single regard. Especially with the weapon that it was given. And now time for the mark upgrade boxes. For every one upgrade you intend on producing of any of the ships that you see here, with the exception of carriers, you're going to need 5 boxes. In the case of carriers, you're going to need 10 boxes. So for whichever ship you're going to purchase and build up, 5 boxes, 5 boxes, 5 boxes, 5 boxes, 10 boxes, 5 boxes, 5 boxes, 5 boxes, although I don't know why you'd be building up a Phoenix frigate. 5 boxes, 5 boxes. Oh, I completely spaced off talking about the Paragon. That's what happens when it's not even a correct model in the game. What does it have going for it? Freaking nothing. Its overdrive only activates when enemies are in both fire arcs. In PvP, that's never going to happen. In PvE, if you manipulate the AI just right, it will happen. It increases the area of effect radius by 100%, increases weapon speed by 10%, and increases rotation speed by 50%. Alright, so no damage increase, nothing major. It just increases the combat statistics. Not really that interesting. Increased weapon speed, increased health damage when you're using missile weapons, so strap them up with missiles and call them good. Moving on. And we have the MERS. Now, because we're going to be using the Eriko for the primary item of this shop, pick up the level 1 MER, the level 3, and level 2, and I'd recommend using the level 1 just because you're going to want to use it to enhance the Eriko. Because the MERS themselves, they're basically, they spawn in, they die, and you just go to where they died at, and you sit in the blight field. Other than that, there isn't anything really good going about them. Nighthawk drones. The only thing that I use them on is my Dreadnought, and I only have 2 of them. Blight screens, haven't used any of them yet. Xeno shells, haven't used them. Xeno resonant armor, haven't used it. Blight siphon, haven't used it. Alien resistor, haven't used it. Alien resistor. Basically any of the alien stuff I haven't used at all. Gold prize boxes are, as always, going to be recommended to be picked up because they're the gold prize boxes, so why not? Silver prize boxes. No, just go for the gold because the gold has the best setup. And especially because everything in it is pre-built or credit, it's going to be especially good for building your ships and fitting them together. Crafting tokens. Depending on what you're doing and what you're building, I can recommend them. Though the price is a bit steep still for the tech that it's represented by. So take that with a grain of salt. You could pick up 6 gold prize boxes, where you can only pick up, what, 5? No, less than 5. 4 crafting tokens. And then resources if you need it. Next up on the list, targets. Except for that's where I'm going to end this portion of the video here. If you found that useful in any way, shape, or form, or if you have anything you'd like to add, feel free to say so below in the comment section. If it's worthwhile, or if you have a tactic you want to share with people to make sure that they can get the maximum amount of points, feel free to say so below, and just like with some of the other comments, I will pin the comment so that people can view it and make sure that the information is shared. But that's going to be it, everybody. Be safe out in the void, happy hunting, and as always, I will see you later.
Target located. Hoping so.